All right, let's dive into something a little wild today. The world of carnivorous plants. Yeah, you heard that right. These aren't your typical houseplants. These are straight-up predators that have completely flipped the script on the animal kingdom.
So you gotta wonder, right? What makes a plant a predator? I mean, we usually think of plants just kinda sitting there, soaking up the sun. What would possibly push a plant to start hunting? Well, the answer is actually pretty straightforward. It's all about survival. And this really gets to the core of it. Most carnivorous plants grow in places like bogs, where the soil is just terrible. It's missing key nutrients like nitrogen. So over millions of years, they came up with this genius workaround. They figured, hey, if we can't get our food from the ground, let's grab it out of the air. They literally evolved to trap and digest bugs, turning their prey into plant food.
Okay, so to really get how this works, let's take a closer look at one of the most famous carnivores out there, the pitcher plant. And what's super cool about this next part is that our info comes from an award-winning science project. A group of high school students did this incredibly deep dive into how these things are built.
So let's break down the trap's anatomy here. You can see it has three main parts. First, you've got the petiole. That just looks like a regular old leaf. Then, growing out from that is the tendril, which is like a skinny connector. And at the very end of that tendril, that's the pitcher cup. That's the trap itself. It's an entire leaf, totally repurposed for one single deadly job: hunting.
Now, how this thing actually forms is an amazing piece of biological engineering. You see the steps here? A leaf extends, a tendril grows, it starts to swell. But step 4, that's the mind-blowing part. To create that hollow chamber, the plant uses something called apoptosis. That's programmed cell death. It literally kills off its own internal cells in a super precise way just to carve out that empty trap. How crazy is that?
And get this, the students' research turned up this incredible stat. That little skinny tendril connecting the leaf to the pitcher cup, it can support 35 times its own weight. That's some serious strength. And it's what keeps the trap's opening pointed up, ready to catch rainwater and, its next meal.
So we've got this super strong, super intricate trap. But what kind of hunter is it? Well, the pitcher plant's lid doesn't close, which you'd think that's a bit of a design flaw, right? But it's actually led to a really unique strategy for catching food.
And here, you can see two totally different approaches to evolution. You've got the Venus flytrap, which is the picky eater. It's very selective, only absorbing specific little molecules. But the pitcher plant, with its always open trap, it's more of a refuse no one kind of deal. Whatever falls in, it tries to digest, from tiny molecules to big proteins. It's a really high-energy strategy, but hey, high risk, high reward, right?
Okay, so we've seen how these plants roll in the wild, but could you actually have one of these predators in your house? Well, the answer is a definite yes. In fact, some of them make for surprisingly low-maintenance roommates. So let me introduce you to the butterwort. Instead of a deep pitcher, its leaves are covered in this super sticky goo that traps tiny bugs like gnats and fruit flies. They're basically nature's flypaper. And they're not just effective pest controllers. They can actually thrive indoors if you know how to treat them right.
And here's your cheat sheet for keeping one of these guys happy. The whole idea is pretty simple. You just want to mimic their natural habitat. They love a ton of sun. But the absolute most important thing is to avoid root rot. Their roots are really delicate and they hate sitting in water. So use soil that drains well and let it dry out a little before you water it again. If you get that part right, you'll have a happy little predator on your hands. All right, so let's zoom out from the windowsill and go back to the wild. Because while some of these plants are doing great in our homes, their cousins out in nature are in a really tough spot. And that brings us to the story of Taiwan's native sundew.
The longleaf sundew is another one of those sticky trap hunters, kind of like the butterwort. It's this beautiful, delicate plant that's been part of Taiwan's ecosystem for a long time. But today, it's in serious trouble. It's now officially listed as a nationally endangered species.
And this quote really just hits you with how urgent the situation is. In Taiwan, wild populations are now only found in a handful of locations, and their habitats are in jeopardy. I mean, what was once common is now just clinging to life in a few vulnerable places. They're being pushed right to the edge.
So, what's behind this? Well, the threats are coming from all sides, but they almost all trace back to us. Their wetland homes are being paved over for development. Heavy rains cause soil erosion that can literally bury entire colonies. Then you have invasive plants stealing their light and water, and pollution from farms poisoning what little habitat is left.
But it's not a lost cause. There is hope.
In places like the Lianhuasi wetland, you've got conservation groups on the ground actively fighting for the sundew's survival. They're out there, by hand, clearing away invasive species and trying to protect that delicate wetland balance. They're giving these incredible plants a real fighting chance.
And that really brings us to the final big question. These amazing plants evolved one of nature's most creative tricks just to survive in the harshest soils on the planet. They are the ultimate survivors. But the question we have to ask now is, can they survive us?